All right, everybody, welcome back. It is Longhorn Friday Eve, and I just went ahead and called this episode Technical Difficulties, and I think it must have made it cursed because I literally just tried to start this stream. I got about 3 minutes into it, and the camera just goes blank. Cameras, computers, streams, technology is testing my patience this week in a serious way. We missed Monday's show. We missed Tuesday's show. We actually did shows, and you can check out the podcast of those shows, episode 102 and 103, up on Buzzsprout or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Link to the Buzzsprout page is horntakespodcast.buzzsprout.com. So we'll see if we can get this one in. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. 102 and 103, we did a whole show, and then we go to YouTube to check it out. And they're both like 6 minutes long, 46 seconds long. Downloads from the streaming service, same amount of time. So I have no idea what's going on, man. We'll just see what happens. Episode 103, really good episode. We had Hardball Harge on from Texas Sports Unfiltered and AM 1300 The Zone. We had a really good talk. You're going to have to turn it up a little bit to hear him talk. Again, technical difficulties. We'll get it figured out. It's just the way it goes. It's Deep Dive Thursday, though. So we'll do our Trace Otra games recap from Week 10. We'll do Sean's 4 big questions of the game for this TCU game coming up on Saturday. We'll deep dive into TCU and Texas from a statistical perspective. And then we'll have some random college football thoughts. You guys check us out on Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube at Horn Takes. You can listen to the podcast at horntakespodcast.buzzsprout.com. Trace Otra games, Week 10. We started off the season really slow, but we've made some really good picks the last 2 weeks. We were going for 3 weeks in a row of perfect picks. We hadn't had an 0-3 weekend all season long. And headed into this weekend, last weekend, Week 10, I really thought we might get our first 0-3. I like to do the tougher games. I don't see any point in just picking easy games. So we shoot for 3-0 headed into Week 10 for our third straight week in a row. Let's see how we did. We got Aggie at Ole Miss. We thought it would be a close game. We thought Ole Miss's home field advantage and the fact that their offense is so good would probably be enough to win this game against Texas A&M. We had Ole Miss 27-23. Score was 38-35. I just didn't think A&M would give up that much offense. I didn't get a chance to really watch this game, so I don't know if there was any other things that went on that made that score bigger. But I think Ole Miss got a pretty big lead, and then Texas A&M kind of chipped away at it and got back into the game late. However, we're 1-0 right there. Oklahoma at Oklahoma State, Bedlam. We thought it would be Bedlam. It's the last Bedlam game, so you know there just has to be something crazy happen. And this series kind of been a weird series anyway. We thought home field would be huge for Oklahoma State. OU's been struggling on the road against really any decent team this whole season. And we said Okie Light gets it done 33-31. They won that game 27-24. Of course, there were some controversial calls. The Oklahoma Sooner fans did not like how they were treated by the officials. A lot like how Texas fans didn't like how they were treated by the officials in the Texas OU game. A lot of missed calls, a lot of no calls that probably should have been called. I don't think Oklahoma doesn't have an argument in some of those. I just think sometimes the Lord giveth, sometimes the Lord taketh away, and it happened to you guys on Saturday. So now we're 2-0, heading into the final game. LSU at Bama. To me, I felt like this was the type of game where one of the defenses could make a play or two that might determine the outcome of this game. You got LSU on one side with a really good offense. You got Alabama with a okay offense, kind of the X factor in Jalen Milroe. And then you got Alabama with a really, really good defense, and then LSU with just kind of an okay defense. So I really thought this one would come down to some kind of defensive play. in that type of game, give me Nick Saban over Kelly any day of the week. I had Bama 33-27. Bama blows them out 42-28. I think there might have been a big defensive play in that game that might have impacted that game. I don't know. We won't go into it. However, we went 3-0 for our third straight week. That makes us 20-10 on the season. Really turned our record around. At one point, we were 500. Matter of fact, I don't know when we were 500, but we were 500 at one point, pretty far into the season. Have really made some ground in the last 3 weeks. We'll be looking to go 3-0 this week. Tune in tomorrow. We'll have our Week 11 Trace Otra games. Sean's 4 big questions of the game for the TCU game. Can the Texas pass defense step up against the number 2 passing offense in the Big 12 and number 16th passing offense nationally? We've seen this Texas team just get absolutely ripped in the pass game 2 of the last 3 games. Houston went for 378. I believe 378 was a career high for Donovan Smith. That was in a close game. Which, by the way, we saw both of these games. Texas gets big leads early on and then has to hang on late. Kansas State goes for 327 yards. That's over 100 yards. That's actually almost 100 yards over Kansas State's average. And it's almost over 100 yards what Texas has averaged on the season going into that game, giving up passing. I don't know what it is. I don't know. I'll tell you what I think it is. Press man versus zone or some of these soft man coverages. This Texas secondary is built to play press. They are big. They are physical. They're athletic. The back end, probably the weakness of this defense. But and when we play press, and I actually saw a graphic on, it wasn't a graphic, it was just a tweet. And I don't know the guy. I don't know how credible he is. I'm certainly not going to go back and watch every single defensive snap and chart all of this. But what this guy says he found is that when Texas is in press man, and this was like a weekend ago. This was after the BYU game. So what he found, allegedly, was that when Texas is in press man coverage, they give up 63 yards per game in press man coverage. When they're in zone, or these soft man coverages, 176 yards per game. That's staggering. And the problem is, like, the defenses, these guys, when you play zone, you got to play zone. You can't bite on the underneath stuff, especially if you're playing safety. You're playing deep safety. We saw it happen against K-State. Derek Williams comes up, bites on a little shorter route. Cornerback on the outside thinks he's got help. He runs right by him for a touchdown. Luckily, the ball wasn't on the 20-yard line. If the ball was on the 20-yard line, it'd been an 80-yard touchdown. That's how wide open the kid was. So I don't really understand, if you're that successful in press man coverage, I don't understand why. I mean, I get you got to mix it up, but it's almost like at halftime they just flip a switch. And really, it's before halftime. We saw it against OU. We saw it against Houston. We probably saw it against K-State. I don't remember. But that last drive before halftime, Texas is going into this soft zone balloon type coverage, and then in the second half they just continue it. And I just don't understand why. I don't understand, but I think Texas is going to have to play better pass defense this weekend if they want to beat TCU. I don't think you can let TCU throw the ball for 300 or 400 yards against you and walk out of there with a win. We'll see. Question number 2, and this one's been answered, folks, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Who plays quarterback for Texas on Saturday? Malik Murphy started the last 2 games in Quinn Ewers' absence. Earlier this week, Sark upgraded Quinn Ewers and said he's now day-to-day instead of week-to-week. And the interesting thing, and folks, I built this outline. I started figuring out what I was going to talk about on this show well before this morning's press conference. Sark hasn't said Malik will be the starter this Saturday like he had the last 2 weeks. And I'm trying to remember how that got worked into the conversation. Maybe it was just he was asked, and maybe just nobody asked him that this week. But to my knowledge, he never talked about the starting quarterback until today, which I found that a little bit odd. And folks, I had this point as well. I said I thought we'd see Malik this weekend. I thought Ewers would come back for the Iowa State game, even though he's been practicing a little bit. He's been throwing down for a week and a half or so. I just couldn't imagine, having an AC sprain in his shoulder, his throwing shoulder, that we'd see him 3 weeks later. Apparently, we're going to see him 3 weeks later. Sark says today on his press conference that Quinn Ewers is the starting quarterback. So this kind of brings up another question, since Sark ruined that question for me. Kind of makes me wonder, how long will Quinn Ewers play? Like, how long can he play? I know the kid's tough. Like, he wants to play. I totally get that. I just can't imagine he's not still in some sort of pain. And how long can you do that? I don't know. We'll see. I'm pulling for him, obviously. And by the way, folks, Malik Murphy did a hell of a job. Let's say Quinn Ewers comes back this Saturday. Everything's good to go. He's obviously, unless he gets banged up again, he's just going to keep getting healthier and healthier as the season progresses, right? He's coming back. He's probably staying back. And so Longhorn Nation ought to send Malik Murphy a gift basket, a special thanks basket, because, man, I know it wasn't always pretty, but that dude did a hell of a job keeping Texas 2-0 during that 2-game streak. There's not a lot of teams in the country that can lose their starting quarterback, play one game against a top 25 team, play another game against a team like BYU. Now, I know BYU's record's not good, and actually, that team is just not that good this year after watching them play Texas, but it's always been a scrappy program. Regardless, there's not a lot of teams in the country that could play a backup quarterback in those types of games back-to-back like that. And by the way, with no experience. Not a single, well, maybe he's had a couple snaps, but the guy hasn't done a lot. Not any meaningful experience at quarterback at the collegiate level. Not a lot of teams come out 2-0 right there. And there were some moments for Malik Murphy where he looked really, really good. Like, you can definitely see the future is bright. Question number 3 kind of got ruined too. Can the limp-along Longhorns catch a break on the injury front? Man, we have been talking about how banged up this team has been really for like the last 5 or 6 games. They've had guys completely out, or they've had guys that have missed a lot of time during games over the course of the last 5 or 6 games because of injuries. Sark said everybody was available for practice this week. It looks like there's not a single soul that ain't available for this game on Saturday. So maybe for the first time in 5 or 6 weeks, the Texas Longhorns have everybody available. And I think, you're getting towards the end of the season. A lot of teams are getting banged up. Bodies are tired. Bodies are sore. Heading down this stretch to the Big 12 title and maybe a college football playoff appearance. Both of those things are still very much alive for Texas. It sure would be nice to be able to keep the team 100%. And it looks like at least for the next 2 days, that's going to be the case for the University of Texas. Everybody's available. Number 4, and I think this one's really important. Can the offensive line match their dominant performance against K-State on the road at TCU? I said it earlier this week. I felt like we were talking to Harge, and I said, Harge, I think this Texas offensive line played their best game of 2023 on Saturday against K-State. They gave up 0 sacks. There was only 3 tackles for loss. And And Malik Murphy really didn't see a lot of pressure at all. And Kansas State has a pretty decent front seven, front four, front six, front seven, whatever the hell you want to call them, defensive front. They're pretty freaking good. And Texas handled them in the passing game. They handled them in the run game. They had almost 2 100-yard rushers in that game. What a hell of a time it would be in the season for this Texas offensive line to just kind of have the light come on for them. We watched them earlier in the season. They struggled. They had some struggles in pass protection. They had moments where they couldn't run the ball against not great teams. And then we saw them go on the road against Alabama, and I think they probably got a little confidence out of that one because they did a damn good job in that game. Not so much in the running game, definitely in the passing game, and situationally in the running game, they were really good in that game. And I think you've seen them just get a little bit better. And I wonder if that game Saturday against Kansas State wasn't like just kind of the breaking point for them where like they get it now. There comes a point in every position group's, lifespan, life cycle where they just get it all of a sudden. I wonder if we didn't see that. It's a night game on the road. They're going to have to deal with crowd noise. They're going to have to deal with a fan base that's been drinking all day. TCU hates them, some Texas. Man, if TCU wins this game, you will see that place just erupt. You'll see the field stormed. You will see goalposts tore down. Crowd's going to be fired up. So it'll be a perfect game for the big humans to just go in there and handle that defensive front for TCU and just take the crowd completely out of the game. Deep dive, TCU. Offense. Looking at these two offenses, pretty similar, really. Kind of what we've seen a lot this season. We got Texas averaging 185 yards per game. TCU averaging 165 yards per game. Texas with a slight advantage in offensive run margin. Passing, Texas is passing the ball 271 yards per game. TCU 290 yards per game, I believe. TCU owns the offensive pass margin by about 20 yards. Scoring offense, Texas scoring 34 points a game. TCU scoring 29 points a game. Texas owns the offensive scoring margin. Here's where it starts to sort of tip a little bit towards TCU offensively. Sacks allowed. Texas has allowed 18 sacks this season. TCU only 14. Tackles for loss. Texas 48. 48 tackles for loss surrendered by these Texas Longhorns. TCU only 36. Texas does have an edge in lost turnovers. Only 12 for Texas, 15 for TCU. I think you look at this statistical breakdown and you start to look at these two teams. The defense is where Texas really starts to separate itself from TCU. And really, in most of these, the defense is where Texas starts to really separate themselves. Texas is an amazing defense against the run, under 100 yards per game. They obviously own the defensive run margin by a heavy dose there, 51 yards difference between their run margin and TCU's run margin. Passing defense, Texas giving up 240 yards per game. TCU giving up 236, so negligible, but TCU is better. They're also a little bit better in passing margin. Scoring defense, Texas 17 points a game, TCU 24 points a game. Texas is owning the defensive scoring margin. Texas got 23 sacks on the season, so with 3 games left in the regular season, 3 games in a bowl game at least. What Texas fans are hoping is you see 3 games, Big 12 championship game, and a playoff game, at least one. So at least 3 more games on top of that. 2 more games on top of that. They're only 4 sacks away from their 2022 total. So they've gotten better, still not even close to being elite pass rush wise. But they've gotten better. And I think if they can add a couple more each game the rest of the season, you're looking at around 30 sacks, which would be better than 27 or whatever it was they got last year. TCU's sitting at 22 sacks, so they're even less elite than Texas is sacking the quarterback. Tackles for loss, Texas has 53 on the season, TCU 46, and that one kind of surprised me because I know Texas is a tackle for loss machine. TCU's right up there with them. Forced turnovers, Texas has 15. That makes them +3 on the season. TCU only 9, which makes them -6 in turnover margin on the season. Not real good. Texas's strength of schedule, according to Sagarin, is good for 10th in the country. TCU's 24th. Opponents' average strength of schedule for Texas would be about 37th in the country. TCU's 53rd in the country. So strength of schedule, Texas has a pretty decided advantage on not only their strength of schedule, but their opponent's strength of schedule. On paper, pretty even game offensively. Texas slightly better in the rushing raw and margin numbers. TCU slightly better in the passing raw and margin numbers. Texas slightly better in scoring raw and margin. TCU better at sacks allowed, tackles for loss allowed. Texas does have a slight advantage in turnovers loss. As we said, it's a little less close when you start looking at it defensively. Texas is way better against the run in the raw numbers and the margin. TCU with a slight advantage in pass defense, both in raw and their defensive pass margin. Texas better on scoring defense, raw and margin. And then we said it, Texas got the edge in sacks, tackles for loss, and forced turnovers. I think you look at those turnovers and you say Texas is plus turnover margin, TCU is way minus turnover margin. That could be something that determines the outcome of this game either way. Again, Texas has the edge in both strength of schedules. You look at this game on paper, and we'll do our predictor tomorrow. The prediction is in. And we'll just do it tomorrow. The formula is done. The predictor has spoken. And we'll let you guys know what it says tomorrow. But this is another game Texas should win. They're a 10-point favorite. I don't know what the lines moved to now that they've said Quinn Ewers was playing, but they were a 10-point favorite on the road with their second-string quarterback. I imagine it's probably moved to 12 or 13 at this point. So we'll have our 4 keys in a prediction tomorrow. That'll be the 4 keys for Texas heading into this matchup with TCU. And a prediction of this game with TCU. College football playoff has been the buzz. It's the second week of the college football playoff rankings. And we haven't had a lot of movement from the original, if any. I don't think there has been any at the top. I think you look at it and there's probably 8, maybe 9 teams that got a shot at this point. And I say Penn State's a maybe. They're sitting at number 9. They've already lost the game to Ohio State. They have Michigan at home this weekend, though. So the outcome of that game could determine whether Penn State's out completely or whether they got a pretty good shot at maybe getting into this thing, or at least a puncher's chance of getting into this thing. Most of the talk, and you know, you got your 5 unbeatens up there: Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Florida State, and Washington. 2 of them are going to play each other, Michigan and Ohio State. Last game of the season. Georgia's got a potential matchup with probably Alabama in the SEC championship game, and that's if both of those teams continue to take care of business. Florida State, I think, has played the toughest teams they've had to play. So they're probably not looking at another tough game until maybe that ACC championship game. Washington's got USC. No, they don't have USC. They've already played USC. I don't know who Washington's got. They've probably got a Pac-12 championship game. I don't think they're out of the woods yet. I think they've got some teams. I think both them and Oregon have some teams left on the schedule that could give them some problems. So the 5 unbeatens, they're the 5 unbeatens until they're not beaten or until they're not unbeaten anymore. So most of the talk has been about these one-loss teams and kind of how they shake out. Right now you got Oregon at number 6, Texas at 7, Bama at number 8, and then again we said Penn State at 9 right this second. But I think it's interesting, and a lot of people have thought it's interesting that Oregon is sitting up there at number 6. I think if you look at Oregon, they've got the least impressive resume out of those 3 teams. Bama has the number 1 strength of schedule in the country. Texas is sitting at number 10 in strength of schedule. Oregon has the 60th ranked strength of schedule in the country. Oregon's best win is against like a QB-less Utah team. And granted, they beat them bad. I mean, they put a beat down on them. That's kind of what you'd expect out of a team that has their backup quarterback. They don't have their star, Cam Rising. Like, Oregon's best game this year is an almost win against Washington, honestly. So what the committee is kind of saying is, we think that you barely lost to an undefeated team is more important than actually playing a tough schedule and having a loss. Texas going on the road and beating Bama is less in the eyes of the committee than Oregon going on the road and almost winning against Washington. It's just kind of interesting the way they look at some teams and the way they look at other teams. I mean, honestly, I feel like Texas and Alabama should be over Oregon. Bama's beat Ole Miss. Bama's beat LSU. Toughest strength of schedule in the country. I don't know. And the thing is, like, if Oregon stays as a one-loss team, you've put yourself in a situation, if you're the committee, where if Texas and Bama stay one-loss teams, or if one or the other stay a one-loss team, it's hard to just go, oh, now we're going to say that they're better. Because all Texas can do the rest of the stretch is finish their final 3 games in the Big 12, and none of their opponents in the Big 12 left are great. Depending on how Oklahoma State finishes out the season, that may be a good win if Texas plays Oklahoma State in the Big 12 championship game and they can go on to win that game. That may be seen as a quality win. But let's say Oregon and Washington meet back up in the Pac-12 championship game. If Oregon stays a one-loss team, that means they beat Washington. Which would, again, I would have to assume, according to the committee, that would be a really good win, since they're basically rewarding Oregon for almost beating Washington. Why wouldn't they continue to reward them if they actually did beat Washington? So I don't know, man. I think the committee's kind of painted themselves into a corner that they may not be able to get out of. At least logically. I mean, the committee can do whatever it wants. I don't think they have to answer to anybody. I think maybe another interesting kind of question is, what if Texas and Bama are the one-loss teams that are sitting right on the outside, looking at that number 4 spot? What does the committee do then? There's a lot of people out there saying, and I don't know that they're people that matter, but there's a lot of people out there saying, man, if Texas and Alabama played today, Alabama would win that game easy. So the narrative has gone from The narrative has gone from Alabama is the worst Alabama team in the last 15 years. So Texas just got lucky that they got to go beat them. Just caught them at the right time, right? That's what the narrative was up until the last few weeks. Now all of a sudden, man, Alabama's great, and Texas wouldn't have a chance against Alabama if they played right now. I'm not sure. I'm not sure you can do that. I'm not sure you can speculate between two teams that have played. I'm not sure that you can speculate that the other team would now win when it comes down to making a decision about which team deserves to go to the playoff. So there's a lot of people that keep bringing that up. There's also a lot of people that say there's no way Texas would get left out. I don't know. I kind of feel like there's not much Texas can do unless Texas just goes out. We've said it. We've been saying it a lot this season. We said it a lot after this Oklahoma game, this loss they had to Oklahoma. Now you got to just beat the shit out of everybody. You gotta Bob Stoops the rest of the Big 12. And I just don't think they're going to do that. They got 3 games left. We'll see what happens. 3 weeks left in the season. There's always craziness down the stretch. A lot of these teams have to play each other, so there ain't no telling what'll happen. I just feel like right now, if Texas, Oregon, and Alabama all stay one-loss teams, I don't know what there is there if you're Bama or Texas that you can do to undo this Oregon being above you thing. I mean, I think Bama has the best shot. If they were to go undefeated from here out, that means they'd beat Georgia, who's a really highly ranked, 2-time defending national champion. I think if you look at this Georgia team, they're really good. But they're not like the 2 Georgia teams that won the national championship. But they're going to get that type of sort of name recognition. I don't know, man. It'll be really interesting to see how all this shapes up as we continue down these last 3 weeks of college football. I really hope we just see just some chaos happen at the top, and some of these teams that I think are better, like Texas and Alabama, move on up, get their opportunity to play in the playoff. SEC announces each school's 2 permanent rivals in baseball today. No surprise. Texas gets Oklahoma and Texas A&M. A&M's built a pretty good baseball program, so those will be interesting series. Oklahoma was just in the College World Series final 2 years ago. They struggled a lot last season, but they got a really good manager, really good skipper, really good head coach, whatever the hell you want to call him. Augie Garrido disciple. Texas A&M, I was looking at all the teams' rivals, and the SEC is loaded in baseball. So you could almost just say every team in the SEC got screwed with their 2 permanent rivals in terms of, how tough those series are going to be year in and year out. But I think there's a couple teams that you look at and you go, man, that's rough. A&M's one of them. A&M has Texas and LSU every single year. And then I think the other one is LSU. They got A&M and they got Mississippi State. And I know Mississippi State was not good at all last season, but they've got a really good program. And they got the ability to recruit people and get people in that program. The SEC football is going to be amazing. We already got a chance to experience it this year. Actually, the last 2 seasons. We had Alabama in town 2 years ago. And then this season we got to go to Tuscaloosa, play a game in Tuscaloosa. We were at both of those games, and they were an absolute blast. I look forward to all of these big SEC college football games, but the baseball in the SEC is going to be absolutely amazing. Just amazing. There's not another conference in baseball with as much talent as there will be in this new baseball SEC. Looking forward to it. Got to wait a whole year plus for that, though, folks. Tomorrow is Prediction Friday. We'll have our 4 keys and a prediction for this TCU game. We'll have our Trace Otra games for Week 11. Can we make it 4 3-0 Trace Otra games in a row? I don't know. We'll see. We'll have some more random college football or college sports thoughts. Check out the podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. We're on Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube at Horn Takes. Follow and subscribe won't cost you guys a thing. We sure appreciate the support. You can email us at horntakespodcast@gmail.com with all your questions, comments, concerns, and criticisms. I love them all. You guys have a good Friday Eve. Get hooked.